like go around the whole way. It's just for you. Okay, thank you so much. Totally.
There, the one he's soon. Alright. Has everyone got it? Is anyone not ready?
Just give me a second. Mine hasn't pulled it up yet.
Sure.
Okay.
Alright. Is anyone not ready?
Nuclear weapons are the hammer of U.S. imperialism. The U.S. and its allies have monopolized nuclear weapons to secure its global empire and ensure that no one can resist. All nations are vulnerable at any point of invasion and destruction by the U.S. Jerusalem 07. The U.S. nuclear arsenal has been being used by the military force of the U.S. global dominance. Washington, the military hegemony is like the globe. How many nations are truly independent in the face of such a formidable firepower? Military might the full of the global hegemony. Washington is at the apex of its hegemonic global power structure. The U.S. have the nuclear attacks to expand and maintain the empire. The use of deadly force was American as apple pie. Americans see themselves as the world's policemen. Now the empire has its cost that people are killed in great numbers. Racism reason is reinforced. Fighting in this wars, Washington and ultimate enforcement remain the bomb. Nuclear weapons remain the cornerstone of U.S. policy. Therefore, the vast majority of Americans' nuclear weapons and nuclear war are distant abstractions. The U.S. nuclear arsenal has been essential to maintaining the U.S. empire. The U.S. has enjoyed dramatic amounts of nuclear power, which is used to expand and to maintain its grand area. Deterrence has been a concern for lesser powers obtaining nuclear arsenals as a means to prevent attacks by the U.S. MIT was not U.S. policy. The U.S. empire exists in Mexico and the Middle East, and from Ireland to Bangkok, it would be impossible for the U.S. to maintain the military commitments it sustains around the world. We not possess atomic weapons and will use them. Nuclear weapons provide us with an umbrella within which we can carry out aggression and subversion with the need consider that it will be impeded under this umbrella of nuclear weapons. We have succeeded in intimidating anyone who might help or take people who we are determined to attack, and your absolute power has corrupted obsoletely. We have had the bomb to in our minds since 1945. The U.S. maintained its capability to create a fear of extinction in the minds of those who cease to intimidate, and the result is endless genocide and intervention for the strategic and material interest of the empire. Anderson 15. Imperial intervention renders it illegitimate and non-existing and worthless entire population, the cultures, values, and social organization to create a cultural point into which the imperial powers are conceived as protector, hiding their own strategic and material interests. The big power remained deeply engaged in a series of wars and conquests in the Middle East. When the regimes fail, the big power settled over divide and rule. That is what the British did with Palestine, Ireland, and India. It is what the imperial capital is doing with Palestine, Syria, and Iraq. Imperial power maintains its focus on the exclusion of perceived rival powers. Imperialism practices double standards. Most tolerates practices exceptionalism. The often pretend to support victims of conflicts while attacking the people, states, and alliances which resist those wars. And Western states prevent the spread of nuclear weapons and the subsequent collapse of their empire. The NPT prevents nations on the periphery from acquiring the bomb. This perpetuates logics of colonial violence and institutionalized nuclear power against the global south. John 14. Security studies have disregarded the security needs of the small states. The NPT envisioned all non-nuclear states for nuclear weapons. The non-proliferation regime are the product of Western great powers. The NPT is a regime that perpetuates the logics of colonial violence, oppression, inequality, inequity. The institutionalized demarcation of NWS and NWS states have led to the nuclear apartheid rates, violates the material inequalities in the distribution of global nuclear resources. Inequalities are written to institutionalize and legitimize the one-sided and Eurocentric logic of blame for proliferation promotes proliferation to the states of the realist rational discourse when divide the world into states that they be trusted, and those who cannot rationalities arbitrarily assigned to the West, while the global South is considered irrational or erode and therefore incapable of a nuclear arsenal. Eurocentrism results in a politics that sides with the imperialists. I find the Eurocentric nature of the non-proliferation regime to be an unjustifiable concentration power. The non-proliferation regime merely serves to reinforce and perpetuate logics of colonial violence and inequality. The only solution is nuclear proliferation in the principle of equal security of all, and breaking the imperialist nations' nuclear monopolies. The antidote of U.S. dominance nuclear weapons fundamentally alter the balance of power and prevent colonial intervention. Stronger 18. No nation with a nuclear weapon has ever been invaded by another nation. Nuclear weapons are revolutionary, allowing the weaker nations to protect themselves from more powerful ones. Not only did the U.S. overthrow Saddam after he gave up his nuclear weapons, and help overthrow Gaddafi after he had given up a nuclear weapon. Nuclear weapons are revolutionary in that they require the ruling class to have skin in the game when facing off against nuclear armed nations. Elites can no longer sacrifice the poor and the weak country without risking their lives. Had Iraq been in possession of a nuclear weapon, the U.S. would never have been invaded. The division of the world into nuclear armed and unarmed nations has long been arbitrary and unfair. No one without nuclear weapons of the U.S. would not have uncontested military dominance. Nuclear weapons, weak nations are derived from the only power capable of preventing invasion. Who are we to deny nations nuclear weapons? They are critical and imperialistic, and collapse of the NPT would destroy the global nuclear policeman and incentivizes widespread and rapid proliferation to the detriment of the U.S.-led global order. Code 15. Non-proliferation could only be possible if the superpowers included to reinforce it. To enforce it, enforcement would be effective because of the power they possess over states. The superpowers apply pressure to induce states to join the NPT. The nuclear states, of course, the nuclear have-nots into non-proliferation. States that would have risked non-proliferation were prevented by superpowers. If many states get nuclear weapons, then all states will see them immediately. If proliferation gets started, it will snowball. This nuclear domino theory is widely believed, and there is substantial evidence for it. As states acquisition nuclear weapons to deter the superpower from using military force against the state, reducing its ability to coerce that state in the absence of superpower enforcement. States would seek nuclear weapons proliferation would be widespread. The NPT renders enforcement for superpowers, and thus the plan, the United States federal government should substantially reduce its foreign military sales and direct commercial sales of arms appropriated to the government of Saudi Arabia from the United States. Solvency. The plan sparks a rapid Saudi proliferation in 18 deterioration in ties with a disparate area of Saudi resolved to pursue an independent security course influenced by states and capabilities to pursue a nuclear program. Preliminary work had been done. Petitions in Syria expressing an ability to comprehend whether non-proliferation should apply to the AKSA. Triggers for acquisition are likely to be prompted by a concern over Iran, and even more compelling, a trigger would be a major breach of the KSA-US relationship, and perception alone sparks a rapid chain reaction when linking 19. Even if Saudi Arabia doesn't get a nuclear weapons, just the perception can spark a nuclear arms race, and arms race Iran would ramp up efforts. Turkey would not hesitate if the entire Middle East power center is laden with nukes, and why not the African power center in Nigeria has a larger economy. South Africa ended its nuclear weapons program too, but those files still exist. They could restart the program. Brazil had a dormant Cold War era nuclear program they could resuscitate, and that eviscerates the NPT Edelman 11. Any decision by the Saudi network to seek out nukes would be highly destabilizing and increase incentives that other nations' ability to pursue nuclear weapons of their own. It could increase their ability to do so by eroding demanding barriers to nuclear proliferation. Each additional state that requires nukes to weaken the non-proliferation regime. And don't confuse our politics with the political hope of liberal. Ethan, do you want me to read this?
Yeah.
The liberal reformism we are interested in building a broad movement or making nations of empires only have a change of heart of destroying the non-proliferation treaty is no easy task. It's the crown jewel of the liberal international order that the U.S. has spent the past 70 years constructing. The U.S. would never purposefully dismantle the institution that codifies its nuclear legitimacy and secures its global empire. Anyone that thinks the United States would willingly turn its back on its global empire shouldn't hold their breath. Instead of native reformism, we offer a method of infiltration, subversion, and sabotage. Our method is one of duplicity aimed at convincing the government to do policies that would indirectly undermine its prized possession. We have to hand them faulty blueprints and internally persuade politicians that our policies would save and secure the U.S.-led global order when in fact they would destroy it. And a bipartisan group of lawmakers is considering the plan now, so let's extend. The cross-ideological group of scholars submitted a letter to Pelosi urging her help the illegal U.S. role supporting Saudi and Yemen. Trump's decision to support the war represents a violation of the WPR. Trump vetoed a congressional resolution that would have terminated the U.S. military aid to Saudi. There is a widespread partisan concern in Congress. The Yemen resolution passed with support ranging from conservatives to low-to-hearings and revenge Democrats. A lawsuit could help redress the amounts of certainty that deserves to be tried. And we must speak the language of power to redirect state policy against itself, to persuade those who hold power to pull levers in a way that would be detrimental to the U.S. empire. That his tactic is preferable to outright resistance, which fails and is co-opted duly on as well. Revolution can be a tactic when thinking about the operating within the current institutional realities. The cracks have emerged through decades of war and imperial aggression. It is these historical conditions that resistance continue to be conceptualized. Dated heritage and revolutionary struggle are no longer viable. We don't open up alternative possibilities of resistance that does not that we should remain ourselves into analysis to be. There's a potential for open device ways to subvert a network and fuse a machine as someone provides a provocative conceptual network to think about a building that is generic forms of resistance to state agencies, administrative radical political movements and anarchists, assuming the same tactic using infiltrations guiding our practices within institutional realities in a way to think about diffuse forms of sabotage and to become saboteurs. We must have a specific political strategy aimed to intervene and deconstruct the war machine at its supply lines. Parental, military logistics, racism, sexism, capitalism, neoliberalism, whatever heard in because it is indifferent to logistics. People don't have their hands on the say this is horrible, just yeah, you're right, it's horrible, but saying so it doesn't go very far. Confronted with analysis of the next response is that you're justifying the system. The entire point is to map the supply lines of the war machine so you can intervene to destroy them. There have been critiques without changing too much. The critique is right, but it fails to reach the people. There are other causal factors. Terrorism has the components of mapping of the systems, literal reconstruction of changing social order, and involves intervening in those material networks and reforms. It requires the activists to become something more than a critic. We need to go and map so we can blow up the bright bridges, and sabotage requires policy-centered scenario planning.
Cool. Are you ready?
Yep.
Awesome. First of all, what was the decision calc to break new?
What do you mean?
What was the decision calc to break new? Why did you break new?
Because we think you're a good team.
Oh, that's so nice. Okay, cool. Does the AF lead to decolonization?
Does the AF lead to decolonization?
Yeah.
We think that the affirmative strategy is helpful in a praxis oriented around decolonization.
So the practice is oriented towards decolonization?
Or towards reducing imperial violence.
Through the state?
What? Well,
Through
through
the state.
sabotaging the state,
But it's-
subverting the state.
But you still read a plan text that says the USFG should, right?
Right, but we're not necessarily
Okay.
saying that, like, we're not defending sort of the deliberative democracy or that
But,
sort of things that
sure.
are traditionally associated
But
with policy.
Actually, your Soman 610 evidence says a bipartisan group of lawmakers is considering the plan now. How does the AF isolate a difference between what is like supposedly radical and what is already in place?
Well, that's the point. They're considering it. They haven't decided to adopt it. We think that it would be very detrimental to their imperial ambitions if they did so, but that's...
So then why would they be considering the plan?
Well, that's the thing. They don't realize it. So we're going to trick them. That's sort of the point of being saboteurs. We're infiltrating and we're
cool.
confusing.
So then
and we're-
I guess that brings me to the Brian 12 evidence. How are you saboteurs?
Well, we've sort of looked at the political process. We've identified what we think is a weak point, i.e. the fact that there is a constituency of people considering cutting off ties with Saudi Arabia and the status quo, and we have sort of mapped that, and we're now advocating for a specific tactical movement to sort of exploit that.
Okay, cool. In Brian 12 it says military logistics, where like what you need to have in the context of like being saboteurs, asks two questions. First, it asks what things are opposing the force, the opposing war machine captured by the state apparatus. What does the AF isolate is the opposing force?
Like, I guess I'm not sure what you mean.
What is the opposing force in the context of the AF? It says military logistics, i.e. the way that you can have a successful saboteur strategy relies on first asking what the opposing force is. What is the opposing force?
Well, we think there are a
Imperialism?
variety of different opposing forces. We think that one of them is Trump, who has exploited the veto process surrounding resolutions of disapproval in order to stop
Right.
Congress from implementing the policy action that we've said is desirable.
So
We
you're
also
gonna,
think
but
that
you're, so
Trump
you're
is a
fiating through
manifest-
Trump, right?
Huh?
You're fiating through Trump circumvention?
We are saying that we should sort of try to convince a sufficient constituency of lawmakers to
Okay.
overcome Trump's veto.
Okay, and then it's also imperialism, right?
Well, we think that we think that that's
Yeah.
we think that's a manifestation of broader imperial violence. The fact
Okay,
that-
cool. I just have one last question. How do you determine what is radical? What is the bright line for
I
radicality?
mean, I don't think the purpose of the 1AC was really to engage in this semantic game about talking about what's
The
radical.
purpose
and
of the
not
1AC
radical.
is talking about how to become saboteurs.
Right.
How do you determine when you are or aren't a saboteur?
Well, again, I don't think that's relevant. The real question is whether or not the
It
sort
says
of
to become
consequences-
saboteurs.
Right. Like we're not making value judgments about people who are or are not saboteurs. We're saying that in this specific context, what we did is sabotage, and we don't need to defend this universalized definition.
Okay, cool. We'll take some prep starting now.
Do you want me to read it?
Yeah.
Just, do you want me to read the guide? I don't exactly know. That's you too. Which one am I going to read? I don't care. I'm ready to read it in just anything that you think is best. Because I trust you. Maybe I just need something. Do you really want me to read anything else? You have the one you should be sent to. You got it? Yeah.
Yeah, start prep, we have 7:25.
9:25.
Oh, yeah, 9:25. Sorry, every time I do prep, I start it at 8 minutes because that's what I'm used to.
That's cool.
Okay, one off case, imperialism policy. I'm gonna grab these photos.
Yes.
This is shared flow paper, you don't have to ask every time. But can I have some flow? Can I have some flow, Jacqueline? The flow, my photos are Tiana.
This is my timer.
Okay. Is anybody not ready? Okay, good.
The domestic space of the U.S. is not a geographic location, but temporal and spatial capacity for the human allows the transcendence of fixed location into universality. The human's rudeness in the landscape is enabled through the frontal black bodies that expand the master's sediment in their indigenous cloak fashioned out of dead king. King 13. Sounding concerns the state of terms of the origin is the land similar of the choice of because of the survivors for because of the next episode of the see the weather native conflict, settlement interview the causes of the associated everything in the domestic space, like the process of the document that tells us after not just having by making body substitutions of the role concerns rudeness ability, unfitting movements, predicated in the fixed of the body, so it's always after having a work and subsequently by kills and the humans make frequent sources of relevance to the same length information of the U.S. claim is only spoken to the seven human taking a study is what is a subs and after just by relation to the land is also in June episodes 2 after the picture those people should the DJ the neighbors between by this the claim change factors of representation that said claim by bodies which you the same space possible but cannot occupy the premises of placing you body the spirit is very much so that people of the business on the show the views that doesn't let people have a turning around house of the pages of any concept places under us thinking people are initially but the native consensus state of non-recent case of source investment comes out of subject issue to those who say twice to just to see name separately overcome the plates and watching the aspects to be when it's to have a better strategy back to address the number of national space and appeals to the state reproduce U.S. colonialism as Psyche 11. The European institution regulation relies majorities from the experience of being a social contradiction to the citizens once appeal the offense already institutions by the same take leaving its existing such government and hope of becoming such a hand lastly after to relate the situations that is ongoing his because of virtue and listen to the work of maintaining our USL according to the student legislation latest in which communities with state utility governments of the states have to recognize that the very process of which the established shapes and subjects that need to be incarnated, which also turns all of their offense but speaking the language of power. And you were the peaceful regulation and criticize the absolute features project that wasn't advocates military alterations and appeal to ethics, which are part and parcel of liberal militarism. This magnifies Western interventionism and militarism through the redirection of criticisms, feigning liberal innocence, the normalization of dominant distributions of power. Starving Act 16. A key feature of liberalism include distance forms of attack from the regulations of what is condemned social conflicts and home policing by whether the ideology conception or word of state cover relations formally separate methodology related justifications based on values and whether central organizations with liberal forms of militarism and religious relative kind of passive are embedded with liberal regimes that turn the lives of central and liberal values the loss of works of religious has impacted Western ways of creating the criticism through research and shooting aspects of criticism virtual production for challenge research and nationals and organized labor relatives which require the belongings productive social political activities possible so for the world relations for hierarchies specific combines with lots of partly productive the global order and global workers. And the one he sees anything but a departure from the status quo by submitting to the endless drive for self-future. The absent cures itself through native death and imperious warfare. Shot in 18. The production of the archetypality just important as the constitution of life and sovereignty, civilization with death, immigrants, savagery, the savagery, so distortability, timeless and forever, forming the practice of savage American women, solid united with the bottom and state nature self, that's just a bit of a civil life, living in civil society, some occasion words within each second, the lessons, substance, time, not connected to connected, intentionality, intimacy, no work, a representation that represents self, and to develop the physical and self, sees constantly embraces of self, and uses with the instance of operation, the sense of self, project, would ministry based in the highly now the summer, just ever present of the hearing, not future, provides for the benefits of civilization, relationship by national husbands, advice, the percent of has no intrinsic meaning, there's just trying to escape so destructive teeth of all from people, purpose of please displace nice obstacles to just other social realizations, other ways destructive boards of energy and features and feelings from church remover objects of nation, the world's consideration, disease, future nation drive, endeavors to hold others beholden to temporality must produce finish the produce many civilization boards of the touches produce sources out by the cell parties after nice sadness of this age recurs and because which is I don't know producing limited the enemy of order that they must eliminate over whom it is can arrest and blast chase and name has been limited such that they suddenly can leave the legitimate commonwealth rather than the basis of free social contract and distance invest with others celebrate foundation by the Saudi transform these spaces for security of the past enemies about this ever expanding exterior influences something was occurred to preserve the status quo and treating settler violence as a thing of the past creates a history that enables the violence of white futurity. Knowing the past comes to be equated with the end of violence. Tuck it all 13. Silicon critical project places is a method of video clip is silicon only production of master replica silicon is configuration to the visual paper project the best in cell future two ways in which the features when know the super passes and units on the present what is past integration produces a positive logical something wave system can be monitored the way it gives the future to scale on from which cities and type some cell future in the days it's not self-conceived for form settlement incorporated people is better to cell future increments of and cell epistemologies and this is a concrete alternative. We refuse to from the aft cell expansion. Our localized refusal interrupts the smooth operation of power and the authority of the state and throws into doubt the entire system of North American rectitude. Ferguson 14. Resistance of how that all political each must be about resisting the political and collective attitudes from politics and occupation that the results very differently. There is a replications of rating verdict such an American so no resistance of opposition power denied the prison authority remaking north standards and pure opposition and joint refused on authority to give no resistance to current options of power refused to deny religions of the state was not bias those in turn of the university class with the state comes to determine what should be followed those who refers in turn insist on rationalism notions and resistance to cursory conversation rules to give without comprehension so refers to those that North American treated states and political system about the theologians limited by the population could recognize rights of like can never be adjusted on the settler states prefer resistance can be negotiated or recognized by native peoples of the individuals within the logical physical power sense preexistence on historical truth and value in the degenerate face of our the agent system not legal things legislative and the fundamental ontological fixed every physical and right to the nations and divisions of the colonial past present and future experience of any people on history structures control his logic accept the basis to language with no materials inherent and every time we make sense of the social sciences itself as active reason and after discussing reduce anything action but the way different modality program political registers presume reasons political theoretical content quotidian share practice and try or die to forefront anti-settler colonial practice. The continuation of a settler-dominated world perpetuates a transversal structural violence that culminates in extinction. The K is a pre-ref, Mitchell 17. Transversal structural violence between the people relations, colonial violence, colonialism, colonial justice, environment, system, and levious violence, ecology, the conversions of patriarchal, the same more social structural violence, and driving extinction itself, destruction of indigenous knowledge, the fallacies of legislative preparation, cultural appropriation, and strategies, undermines the forms of relations of the nature, colonial genocide, what industries, destruction, man, killing, displacing indigenous communities, undermining indigenous modes of governance, against systems, validation, destroying frontal relationships between life forms, erasing knowledge, colonial events, with clear fundamental drivers of global violence, exchange of response to extinction, focus on managing regulations, insufficient destructions, violence, and hegemony, under the private process, to address extinction, and to focus on netting, confronting, dismantling information, so as forms of global overwhelming within Western ideas, concepts of conservation, conservation strategies, often involves because indigenous people lead the social colonization, touches the gas within confronting global patterns of extinction, plus decolonization, colonization, not simply political, global patterns of extinction is necessary to ensuring the ongoingness of rural life forms on Earth. Case. No regional pro-lift, too many obstacles. Wolf 15. Legal public who sanctions and the circle to guard materials Pakistan and certain independence from Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is extremely limited nuclear infrastructure. Reactors in Mecca, Oman, 2022. Turkey, Barstow, the U.S. Syrian rebellion. Turkey is the sign and Navy, Egypt, and Jordan. Israel, the primary challenge to nuclear weapons would be divert resistance or critical economic progress into their scan evidence of proliferation begets proliferation. And all NATO allied countries have interchangeable weapon systems. That means there's no barrier to Europe, Finland, and the planet circumvented Trump imperials in the military-industrial complex. Live 19. Trump declared an emergency to the congressional oversight with emergency complaints in these countries. The State Department, depending on the recent already authorities sources for news, is being deployed this rationale to send more force to assessment ration that arms in Saudi Arabia is not about the capitalism of the military industrial complex. And Saudi turns to Russia and China when the U.S. pulls out. Terminal solvency deficit in turns case because it allows the U.S. to pretend that they've resolved violence in Yemen and
What? Move on. Don't read this part.
Okay. Okay. Then solvency. The Barmer evidence on solvency defends closing the gap between research and policy. Policy is a deputization, and they make debate the war room. Hardy Moten 13. Those applies to provide governance of visibility, new form of expropriation, state interest is hardness, governance is deputization, governance is willing participant, public privatization, grants capital analysis, knowledge, public policy, filing, massive, moral provocation, those are correct, and those are correcting convergence of governance of that is totally military of exclusion is those who know to take latest interests essentially who want to take serious people policy, and it's curriculum against the study rights against all rest, lead, remuneration, policy, so more policy, participate, more change, administration, without the interview by the level leads to crisis policy, running policy, productivity, express implementation, provided by wrong participation of the wrong, there must be participation might be about some masturbation to the direction of itself and others are done by the facilities of deputy mayors and mentioned will lead away towards concrete changes in the face of crisis. Okay.
Alright, good for cross-six?
Yeah.
Perfect. The Hardy Moten evidence you just read, what is deputization?
So we would argue deputization is this sort of like gaming of debate and scenario planning in terms of like feeding into the military.
Yeah, are you
industrial
familiar?
complex?
It's literally like creating deputies. It's like policing. Does that make
It's like
sense?
literally like
Okay,
creating
okay, it's just-
military industrial complex.
Yeah, it's like
policing.
literally the word
That's what I was
deputy.
looking for.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. The K. Status of the K.
We read one conditional advocacy statement, but we will go for the alternative.
That's fine. The Ferguson evidence, you say like this is a concrete alternative. What is the alternative?
The alternative is refusal.
How does refusal work?
Okay,
Just-
so we would say that refusal is can operate in two, or like we refuse two things. The first thing we refuse is to recognize U.S. sovereignty. The second thing we refuse is the AF's reps.
Right, the
The
abstracts
action
are
of the
predicated off of U.S. sovereignty, so we really, like, it's like
Yeah.
refusal of sovereignty. If we win that they are a predication of that, it's a refusal of the AF's representations of sovereignty within the space.
Okay. Does the alt?
Does it do anything?
Yes.
What does it do?
We say that refusal is generative, especially in the context of this debate round. We say that the fact that all of your offense is garnered off of your representations, refusal of your representations is a generative process insofar as denying to acknowledge, the refusal of these seller epistemologies has an impact.
Right. That impacts things like subjectivity and like advocacies because it's
But it's just like us as individuals. Then what do we do? Like activism? Is that the end goal?
Right. Well,
Alternative?
Ferguson does a really good job of isolating the difference between like resistance and refusal. So like resistance would be kind of trying to engage and create that political change within the state, i.e. like the plan, whereas Ferguson goes into really good depth about what refusal actually is a refusal to even accept that the state has sovereignty over something in the first place. Like Jacqueline will do a really good job of this in the 1NR, of kind of clearing up what refusal really is, because I don't think that a minute is kind of enough to just do it justice, if that makes sense. But you can read through Ferguson, gives really good examples of that.
So
Things like Cherokee nations creating their own passports when they go to like Britain, and like citing 500 years of treaties and saying, why would I have a US passport if we have these treaties? I refuse to accept that they have sovereignty over me, presenting their passports and then thusly being let in.
I guess when the state is actively doing bad things, i.e. vis-a-vis militarism,
I.e. constantly.
What does refusal do in the face of that violence? For instance,
Those
you as
who don't.
individuals refusing to sort of partake in the political, does that just
Refusing to affirm those forms of like violence.
Well, do you refuse the political?
And we refuse the political insofar as it is settler colonial.
Okay, so you won't engage the political is the question.
We think that question is like trying to force things like resistance into the sphere of the political, which dooms it to failure. Because that forces things like co-option, assimilation politics. We'll turn all of the ideas that ceding the political is necessarily bad. We think it's good. The only way to solve.
So, wait, can I have one?
Give me 1 second.
I have you at 9:47. I don't know.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Okay.
Those 2 seconds will be of vital
Oh wait, no,
importance.
I just didn't hear what you said.
Oh, gotcha.
No, I was just like,
Sending it out.
I love when somebody sends a case note that was due on
Bruh, I love when the sophomores send me their cards for a case neg that was due 3 weeks ago this weekend.
Thursday. I love doing sophomores work for them. And Jack,
And there might be one more card, but probably not. So I didn't.
Is it included in the doc or?
No, I'll send it if we read it, but it's like very low probability.
Okay. Case K?
Yep, cool.
Today is Saturday. Tomorrow's my birthday.
Happy early birthday.
Thank you.
You're feeling wonderful. What order is case in?
Oh, it's just the first advantage, and then I'll answer like the
On the
Barma
page.
indict on the bottom of the first advantage.
My laptop is running really slow right now, so it might take a second for it to pull up.
Do you have a time for this?
No, I don't. I have like, that's what I was thinking. Okay, is it just the stuff in the body?
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyone not ready? Cool. Vote affirmative to massively reduce imperialist violence. Western powers utilize their monopoly over nuclear weapons to threaten and encourage countries in the Middle East, Africa, and Latin America. The act sabotages the Non-Proliferation Treaty regime, which destroys the Western monopoly. The spread of nuclear weapons ensures targets of imperial intervention can deter the Western nuclear retaliation. That's Schellenberger. They say no regional proliferation. The only warrant in this card that's relevant is Saudi Arabia, because so long as we win that one state can proliferate, they've conceded the co-environment evidence, which says that fundamentally changes the game in terms of the cost of acquisition for other countries, and Saudi can proliferate rapidly. That's Gergely 19. Saudi Arabia is becoming what scholars call a nuclear hydra that can weaponize relatively quickly thanks to ENR. Military civilian are not completely separate. Allows countries to avoid international sanctions when the United States bloc. Riyadh, the nuclear market is changing from a unipolar war. The industry's ability to regulate supplier behavior depends on great powers, renewed supplier competition, or broader access. Let Saudi Arabia pit suppliers against each other and secure better products and more advantageous terms of use. The argument that NATO is interoperable is irrelevant to the affirmative, which isn't actually predicated off of Saudi having access to the arms sales, but rather the arms sales' symbolic value in terms of U.S. security guarantees. By having the U.S. end arms sales, it signals a complete reversal of our current stance and causes Saudi to develop nuclear weapons as a result of their fear of the Iranians. The circumvention argument. First, on the framework debate on the K, we're going to be impact turning a model of fiat that does not allow us to talk about the consequences of plan implementation, and that assumes a certain degree of good faith or durability. And second, they're just wrong. As so long as Congress were to pass a statute, it would be impossible for Trump to cite the emergency declaration. The emergency declaration just allows him to get past things like legislative holds and to accelerate the process, but not to completely ignore an act of Congress. The next argument about a turn to Russia. They had zero evidence to substantiate this as of the 1AC, but it's completely irrelevant anyways, because as I substantiated above, the actual physical arms themselves are irrelevant in the context of our internal link argument. Finally, the last Barma indictment will be answered on the critique framework debate. Go there now. The neg must prove the plan is worse than the status quo or competitive alternative. Anything else once the 8 minutes of the 1AC offense creates unfair and unpredictable burdens that weaken content retention and discourage future research. Our theory of subversion necessitates policy analysis. We need to know where the cracks are in institutions and which methods work best. Specifically, scenario planning is pedagogically valuable for skills like theory testing, critical reflexivity, and analytical pluralism. Yes, it can turn debate into the war room, but it can also be appropriated against existing militaristic institutions. Our evidence all speaks to the fact that appropriating military logics is the best way to effectuate anti-imperialist praxis, and policy discussion isn't a site for unethical subject formation. It's an opportunity to experiment with roles that we otherwise couldn't. Role-playing gives us the necessary confidence and skills to confront institutions of violence when we leave the debate space. They have not forwarded an alternative ethical decision criteria. You can't reject the WNEC's implicit focus on preventing violence. Saying that something is unethical isn't the same as forwarding a sustainable concept of what ethics is. Unless their theory is able to explain literally everything in the world, their form of anti-ethics ends up reifying inside-outside binaries and analyze consequences in 1917. Onto epistemologies, ethics, political agency, or interlink. The world is not governed by immutable laws, but instead by intra-agential processes. Assumptions about ontological properties yield problematic efforts. They stifle political imagination. They treat what happens on the ground as unintended consequences or collateral damage. Unintended consequences may be a result of irresponsible political decision-making. Such attitudes led to the invasion of Iraq. Ethically and politically sound decision-making cannot be based upon abstract aspirations or overarching theories. Permutation do both. The F is a prerequisite to effectively actualizing the alternatives politics. Chapter 17. Tactics that make us feel good because they're already are not the same as effective tactics. They can be the opposite. The state of war political judo, whereby the West actions may be turned around and used to strengthen the right. The provocateur is a sinister mission. The provocateur provokes actions that attract the unwary into acts that allow the police to pounce and lock them up. There are many accounts of FBI's and agents of provocateurs into organizations for the purpose of dividing, disrupting, discrediting them. The civil rights movement, the ruling class developed covert strategies for undermining the new radicals. Major provocateurs concentrated on enticing revolutionaries to commit acts that would divide the movement, landing them in jail, disrupting the highly effective African American people's movement. Agent provocateur tactics are through their protests against the Iraq War and Occupy. This manipulation continues to this day. The King evidence, top level link debate. The affirmative is a massive link turn. All of their evidence says that the U.S. ability to perpetuate destruction is how it maintains its coherence. The affirmative makes that impossible because when the United States tries to invade third world states, they get nuked. And settler colonialism can't explain imperialism. Hart agree to K. Empire establishes no territorial center of power. The U.S. does occupy a privileged position. Empire, but this privilege derives not from its similarities to old European imperialist powers, but from its differences. Andrew said the United States believed they were creating a new empire with open frontiers. This idea survived and matured and has emerged on a global scale. Empire presents itself not as a historical regime originating conquest, but runs an order that suspends history, fixes the existing state of affairs. Empire presents its role not as a transitory movement, but as a regime with no temporal boundaries. The practice of empire is continually bathed in blood. Empire wields enormous powers of repression and destruction. Our political task is not simply to resist, but to reorganize them and redirect them. The struggles of the British Empire as well as to real alternative will take place on the imperial terrain itself. There, Zaki evidence, the 1AC doesn't enhance state legitimacy. Yes, we reference the existence of the state, and yes, we target specific state practices that are bad in specific ways that radical movements can can engage in tactics of subversion to undermine those state practices, but that is not the same thing that their evidence is talking about in terms of recognizing institutional legitimacy. If anything, the entire point of the 1AC's politics is that the U.S. is illegitimate, and it can be baffled by, and it can be baffled by effective strategies, and we should actively try to do that rather than passively resigning ourselves to the status quo state of affairs for fear of co-option. The argument that we're just piecemeal reform is obviously incorrect. Yes, we advocate for a specific tactical approach, but that's also part of a holistic movement that is not about reformism and is not centered around accepting the state as is or creating complacency, but rather upon radically upending the existing order. And indeed, all of our internal link arguments are reasons why we necessarily collapse U.S. empire in and itself in one foul swoop, which is the opposite of sort of a piecemeal strategy. They say we're settler futurity, but that's definitely incorrect, given the fact that we've made no appeals to extinction or our own lives. We've said that people in the West, people like us, should take risks, should risk there being more nuclear weapons out there in the world such that we can reduce ongoing imperial violence of the status quo, which also answers their next argument. We don't view settler colonialism or imperialism as things of the past. Rather, the entire point of the 1AC is that there are active and ongoing processes that need to be mitigated by effective and pragmatic advocacy right now. The alternative, there's no solvency. Localized moves can't spill up. Refusal is not going to prove effective on a macro scale, and is not what we should center our advocacy around in the context of the debate space, given the fact that, well, their example of passports, for instance, definitely does ameliorate some degree of violence for that specific group of people, but it is not enough to confront the weight of oppression, and refusal requires more specific strategies in order to actually have any practical effect. And anti-militaristic activism feels good, but it never reaches the end result. Try or die for sabotage, Meyer 12. Activists organized the latest coordinated set of peace protests in history trying to stop Iraq. Millions took to the streets of the demonstrator to capture media attention. They did not stop the war. After a surge in decline, Obama pulled the last troops out. Democracy still nowhere inside. The U.S. is committed to withdraw. Third, there's no way to describe these outcomes as products of any happy story. Peace activists were right, but the evidence for their claims continued to build, and they were less visible. Once the most bellicose possibilities seem restrained, the movement coalition will start to free differences among groups become more salient. As some groups turn into more pressing issues, protest movements and liberal politics are closely tied to more conventional political action. When your putative ally is office, it's harder to take to the streets. It was harder for activists to get Democrats in the streets. It was all too easy for most Americans to look away most of the time. Now, their only warrant for why we shouldn't engage in sort of pragmatic strategies like the 1AC is because of co-option, which is sort of the point of the Shepard's evidence, what we've read above, that we can resist co-option so long as we learn the tactics and strategies associated with infiltration that are frequently deployed by agent provocateurs. But there is no reason to believe that refusal can't be co-opted so long as we are unwilling to see how these things play out, how these things actually play out in the political arena. The refusal can be cast in various different ways in order to sort of mobilize people into reinforcing the existing hierarchical institutions rather than deciding to mobilize and tear them down.
Before we run cross-ex, do you need the 2 cards?
Yes, please.
that weren't ready?
The Meyer 12 stuff, and then the one at the top of the keys wasn't sent out as well.
Oh, I'm
Yeah.
sorry about that.
Oh, you're fine.
Okay, there's...
Let me know when you get this.
A second. I'm not kidding when I'm saying it's taking, bro, like it literally won't
Yeah.
even, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whenever you're ready. I'm good whenever you are.
Yeah, I'm good.
Alright. Is pro-life the only thing that's sustaining the U.S. empire?
Well, we don't think pro-life is sustaining the U.S. empire. We think the
Sure.
non-proliferation
Sure.
regime is a crucial aspect of the United States' ability to conduct imperial violence abroad.
So is it the most important aspect?
I mean, I'm obviously not going to fall into the trap of answering a question like that, but our point is that if states were to acquire their own nuclear deterrence, then there's all sorts of different forms of oppression that are ongoing in the status quo that would almost immediately cease.
So, oppression ongoing in the status quo?
Yeah.
What forms of oppression does the app solve?
What forms of oppression?
Yeah.
Well, sure. So things like the U.S. military interventions, for example, the ones that occurred in Iraq, the ones that occurred in Libya. I mean, the death tolls are massive, and in addition, it's not just that there's sort of discrete different interventions like Libya and Iraq, but there's also sort of ongoing military engagement and economic coercion in places that have U.S. military bases that
Okay,
can't
sure. So
necessarily
then
be
is the
excised without a nuclear deterrent.
Does the app forward a util framing?
I mean, we haven't said the word utilitarianism. We've said that the judge should look at consequences, and we've said that they should engage in cost-benefit analysis in terms of remediating material oppression.
Okay, but should the judge way, saving the most lives possible, magnitude, etc.
We think that the judge should vote for the best material strategy for combating oppression. And that is probably measured in terms
How
of
does
violence that's being conducted.
Okay, so you're saying yes, probably you two?
Well, I mean, I'm not going to accept a label that you're going to impose and then distort and contort. I'm going to say what we defend, and what we defend is cost-benefit analysis, just saying
Cost-benefit analysis.
there are oppressed populations that are
Alright,
being
let's move on.
victimized
Alright, can we talk
right now.
about the Shepherd 17 card? How is he a prereq to solving the alt impact?
Well, so the specific warrant in the Shepherd's evidence is that basically, absent learning the tactics of sabotage and subversion, then any movement or any attempt to do anything to sort of remediate settler colonialism will be infiltrated and corrupted by agent provocateurs. And it gives examples of movements throughout history that have been sort of derailed by those sorts
Okay,
of
but how does the
bad
act,
actors.
which only solves the US empire, prevent that?
Well, no, it's sort of a broader argument about our framework and our approach and our orientation towards the world, which is that when we learn about sabotage, when we map institutions, and when we sort of engage the state in the way that we have prescribed, that allows us to resist those provocateurs.
Okay, sure, so then that leads me to what the perm looks like. How do you permute refusal of US sovereignty with a plan that goes through the USFG?
Because our argument is that we don't recognize U.S. sovereignty, and yet the U.S. is still...
How do you go through the USFG without recognizing its sovereignty?
Because we don't have to say that the bill that the plan is attached to is necessarily legitimate in order to say that it should occur in order to remediate oppression.
We have 9:49 starting now. Stop prep, we have 5:14. I'm reading one card. I'll just send it out in the body if everyone's good with that. It should be sent. The order, if your flows depend on it, we're splitting the K. I'll take an overview, the framework debate and the link debate. Jacqueline will take permanent all.
Is the overview, should it be a separate sheet of paper?
No. Actually, can I run to the bathroom really fast? Thank you.
I guess, can I get water? Sorry about that. I've been drinking so much water too. Okay, everybody ready? Settler colonialism is a structure that coheres the status quo as a settler's reach for frivolity. For the settler to transcend into a continually perfected state of humanness, and there are both the native and the slave to exist in a position of their time or space. Think about it like this: settler colonialism and anti-blackness are two different theories, but the project of humanity is only perfected through their intersection, or the trithe turns, and always the case for two reasons. First, structural analysis is prerequisite to the coherence of the impacts of the affirmative team issue. Aaron and face, they just don't understand how the world works, and strong evidence gives a really good explanation as to how the system leads to foreign wars. Suffered to engage in foreign wars in the interest of securitizing the domestic subject. And two, the outcomes of switching for the papering over the settler violence and creates a systems of settler innocence. The way apps 1% solvency framing is an independent link to the K because they don't want to grapple with the implications of the epistemology of the board, and more specifically, don't have to. On framing, the role of the judge is very critical intellectual debate should be a place where we analyze our epistemological assumptions. First, this leads to dogmatic debates with blanket assumptions where we can't confront the implication of structure that exists in our arguments. The role of the ballot is to disorient the everyday spatiality of colonialism. If we win this argument by negative presumption, because you have one question starting once the House settlers operates a counter-interpretation, is they have to defend the epistemological assumptions of the 1AC frame of relevant to the procedural question that settler colonialism cannot be separated from the context of the plan because it is hard to structure into the assumptions that threaten the impact on our property. That first is that plan focuses on the 1AC is 8 minutes and the plan is 5 seconds, and make them defend all 8 minutes, but this means that they still have to defend a USFG action. Via this list where we can't actually material policy in this round, but we can't change the political representation. And the most important thing in this debate are the representation be forward and B, and plan focus papers over in-run instances of settler dominant violence and reified debates violent nature. Here's their interpretation creates bad debates, and even worse, advocates like Carl Rove see their interpretation skis down to the absence that allows teams to win is by having race justification. This turns portable skills, education, and procedural fairness because it transmitters to the violent nature of debate to separate out of race justifications. They have to cohere to their plan that the asset of choice of discussion is not a value neutral, but a consequence of narrative framing. The 1AC is
static artifact, then their attempt to escape that initial framing is in and of itself a form of violence as Kepler in 95 the trust formulation is the person of political knowledge to wish up to conduct the whole speech and what is fluid choose to fluid remove not consider this reactive objective to be relevant part of the no reconsider active objectifying half wants what there are useless which are the symptom of the press diagnosis of brain pattern and analyze power discourse and abuse of power nothing prevents question we can step towards preaching change delivery and naming the agent of fear and willing to question over use language will prepare willing to power privilege of use to use it second is practice a fairness is never neutral directly privilege just with a bunch of coaching and B defending your access and heard and debate the plan is informed by the advantages of nature and when your assumptions are flawed about then so too is your plan text and 3 education to debate 18 also equal to settle by common sense for the sake of education challenge give a systemic basis for actions and prerequisite to determine the best approach towards resolving the money see and people turn their education to actually confront the structures that accumulate to cause violence that they only means ours is that better and has are so better that they cannot say that the practice of what they get out of this debate they've read a USFG action they watch a fiat utilitarian framing shouldn't come first don't let them tell you the cost benefit framing is literally utilitarian framing they're just trying to be shoddy and to get out of any links to prove that you just read the app not toward a pedagogy of sabotage but rather just to win this plays into the very thing the app aims to critique and self-applaud method for risk calculation depends solely on the settlement and plantation grammar of human versus a human it doesn't take into account gratuitous violence against black people or the genocide of millions of native people they are literally trying to analyze the impacts of the affirmative through an inherently settler colonialist structure. But even if you get the utilitarian framing, we win for two really strong reasons. The first, their impacts are innate. They don't access the root cause. The act covers over structural reasons. States can engage in war, making in the first place one keep white girls with an impact that can't even solve for interior cause means only the alternative can actually impact the nation. North American settler action. We don't need to win. Also, to win that the impact calc outweighs on the ontology made 1713. The settlers are secure by the ontological positioning of genocide, fungibility, genocide affirmative clears limit the fungibility of black occupied the conceded ontology made means that it should frame the entirety of the link made on all root cause rate. It's not that fair aggressive. They misunderstand the thesis that the metaphysical question we raise in claiming proximate causes first leads to bad forms of being because A, we don't confront our biases, we don't engage with the structural nuances of the world. B, this turns our standards for because the prison spilled claims aren't actually real world, rather they're dog whistles for respectability politics, which appropriately contains the method of the act and their interpretation may usually be highly skeptical of the reason, but a group there's 1917 in their hard and every true evidence here. I'm going to explain the root cause of all of their lines to talk about the one I see. Well, after the British started colonizing most of the Middle East, post-dissolution of the Ottoman Empire, they imposed boundaries that split up the most Middle East. They didn't use existing lines, and thus they divided huge ethnic groups like the Kurds. British colonial rule is what split up those people and caused things like ethnic wars and genocide, which explains all the violence in the app happens in the first place. It's literally ethnic war. Saudi Arabia's position of the arbiter of power initially was predicated off of their being the pet of the British Empire. The U.S. did the same thing, thing with them after Britain pulled out. It also explains why we use things like the genteel colonialism of the app to assert dominance internationally through practice. They'll do a lot more of that on the links, but if we have the best explanation for violence of the one you for our method, because we are the only team that actually understands why that violence even happens in the first place. When we win because we win the debate, and even if they're winning, risk of their impact, it's the reason that the K turns there's zero chance to solve for genocide. There's at least the alternative to solve I already answered this on ID and hard and negative evidence. We only have to explain the affirmative. Explaining the world is an impossible burden, but if you've done enough, it means you should put our explanation. 8 minutes is not enough to explain why the world works on the link debate. First is the new office that moved to innocence. The new office turns their off-topic education class often on from early stages terminal defense of them because they're actually trying to negate net clash to the point of breaking into app because it makes pure prep guesswork proves they don't actually think that clash is good enough. Second is the field link feed and implementation of analyze the have to hypothesize about real world violence against other people and pat themselves in the back after an app valid these two literal saviors and tactics within the debate space, and they don't just get to weigh the app just because they stood up and read it. It's the same rhetoric as quote unquote solving Yemeni genocide gut check. They just don't. Second is the Stravianakis link. Their appeal to the state creates forms of liberal militarism, i.e. police for violence and home and breeds use ruse of benevolence that allows U.S. to continue forms of fucked up colonialism and colonial imposition abroad while fighting and plan on the seizing of arms as a terminal defense against enemy critique of the U.S. Don't let them claim sending a bill through Congress doesn't reify the state. It does because it imagines the state as a good benevolent actor. Whether or not that's the idealized implication of the affirmative, the app can't get away the fact that liberal policymakers will inevitably make the plan look like a win for the U.S. on our international dominance for large. They read a card and want to see that says the plan is already going to happen now. People are already thinking about it. Probably proves that no matter what's going to happen, they're going to imagine it as a win for them. Yeah. Results in more on this inherently results in more on the ground impacts when we stop arms sales. We just invade physically. We put boots on the ground and literally invade countries because we quote unquote stop arms sales as a justification. They can't be through this, or it turns all of their standards on framing. They say that they're accepting the state, but none of their solvency mechanisms and cards in the 1AC are predictive of going through the state. Rather it says quote unquote infiltration can be a tactic that anarchists pursue when thinking about operating within current institutional reality. They're making unwarranted claims and mischaracterizing their evidence and never advocates for going through the state. It just says that we should embrace anarchic things. I already said that the plan is happening now. They're already thinking about it. It's not anarchy when the political is already doing it. Third is the global policing link. Any argument that others follow on proves that the solvency of the app is predicated off of the U.S. maintaining global hegemony post-plan. The only way to impact global hegemony is through the U.S. continuing its process of world ordering to ensure that others follow in their footsteps. It turns the app because they rely on the militarism of policing or the continued U.S. international control. The 1AC Co-15 evidence literally relies on the continuance that the U.S. is a good liberal actor internationally. Don't let their analysis shift you. The solvency is still predicated off of the sovereignty of the U.S. post-plan widespread. It says, quote, widespread proliferation could only be possible if superpowers colluded to enforce it. Their enforcement would be effective because of the power and influence they possess over other states. It literally proves that the U.S. pulling out of non-proliferation treaties, i.e. the app, is a way that we can assert international dominance over other people. It is an example of genteel colonialism that turns the AF, right? The only link turn that they have made on this, the only defense to any of the link arguments is that they are against the state, which is inherently not true. They just don't understand how the state works and how imperialism works. We've won the word cost debate means that they don't get any link turns. I've already said that stuff. On the lost key evidence, they said that they don't recognize the institution. They don't recognize the institution as a legitimate. They must baffle it, but the plan is literally happening now. They're not going to baffle the state when the state is already doing the plan. And they say that piecemeal is holistic, and they're not accepting the state. I already answered that. They don't upend the order or collapse the empire when they reify it in the first place. It turns the entirety of the act because the impacts of the act are literally predicated off of upending the empire. Where they don't do that when we won the genteel colonialism league, we won that the act does nothing but reify the very impacts that they claim to solve, or probably proves that the only way that you can vote in this round is negative. When we won that there's literally no way that the act can solve, also means that a tried the alternative, but we don't even need to win that when you can have a neg ballot on perception. Jacqueline, do I need to say anything else? Okay. Cool. Yeah, they don't turn the future stuff. They don't take weapons out. Cool.
Take prep before process. Okay, 518.
Sorry, how much?
518.
All right. Whenever you're ready.
Okay. So let's start on the second link argument. Why is fiat a sort of a manifestation of saviorism?
Right, so it allows the AF to hypothesize about real-world violence against other people and pat themselves on the back after an AF ballot. It leads to like literal saviorism tactics, like washing your hands clean
Well, I
of the violence you
understand
talked about in
that's
the
the
last
assertion, but I'm wondering what's the warrant. Why?
Well, right. It allows debaters to read things like proliferation scenarios or like extinction level impacts,
We didn't
and
read
then be able
extinction
to.
impacts. We just said that imperial
Right.
violence
Okay.
is
So
bad.
being able to solve U.S. imperial violence, I think, is an even like more grotesque example
we
of this.
didn't
Is
say-
being able to solve.
I think we had plenty of time to clarify in cross-ex. Well, and we did repeatedly clarify in cross-ex that we don't think like the 1AC is sufficient to wipe our hands clean of settler violence or imperialism. We
Okay, so then what does the AF do? Then the AF uses
we
the
said-
okay,
we said
right,
it was a
right. So
good
let, right. So,
practice to
so if you're
ameliorate
trying to ask a
certain
question,
issues.
I'll answer it. Then it uses the picture of imperialism, doesn't even claim to solve it, and then tries to use the impacts of that and garner the impacts of imperialism against a critique that's
So I guess
actuating change
if
against the
we-
foundation of settler colonialism.
If we're in the debate space and we lay out a strategy and we say that if we utilize the strategy, that would stop X form of violence, that's automatically bad because it's saviorism?
I think you have to win that you stop it. And when you've conceded that you don't stop imperialism, and
Well,
you're just
we
using the
conceded
image
that
of
we don't solve
imperialism,
imperialism as a macro structure. We said we resolve specific instances of imperial violence
Okay, right.
so long as our strategy is actually implemented, and we're trying to convince y'all to hop
We're
on
saying-
board with our strategy.
Right, you don't just get to weigh the AF because you stood up and read it. Using things like imperialism
Well, we laid out a
as
very
the
specific
terminal
method
impact.
for how
Right,
our
but you
strategy
just
could
right, you just
be implemented.
said that imperialism in and of itself is not going to be resolved by the AF. What impact does the AF garner, other than like
Well,
that doesn't make any sense to me. Like,
this
right,
is,
it's
this
not
is
a
very
coherent
weird
claim.
binaristic thinking, where it's like either imperialism gone or no impact to the AF. It's like obviously
No, it's not.
there are
It's not.
certain
It's not. It's
instances
not.
of
It's not. It's
imperial
not a
violence.
binaristic thinking. It's not that. It's the using images of violence to try and garner an AF ballot.
So-
Right?
so
It
basically
creates.
this argument is just you don't
can I
solve, ergo
please
you're
answer? Can I please answer your question? It codifies images of violence to the ballot to make debate inherently invested in instances of violence to be able to win the ballot. Even
Okay.
especially when you say we don't even have to solve for imperialism, but we're still going to talk about it and use imperialism as a structure to claim that we solve for it.
I think that's a little bit off the mark, but I want to ask about the framework interpretation. What does it mean to be a critical intellectual?
A critical intellectual is someone who analyzes the epistemological
But I guess how does the judge make a decision? Like what?
evaluate your epistemological assumptions.
Well, I get you're telling them to evaluate, but how do they evaluate it? That's sort of the point of
Right, so
framework.
that's the role of the ballot, is to disorient everyday spatiality of colonialism.
So
If
what
we win
does
this
that
argument, disorienting like instances where like settler colonialism is cohered through like the debate space. So like if we win, that like the representations are like the AF is inherently bad, you should reject it.
So
Basically,
any
we win
risk of
a
a
we
win,
win a.
vote nay?
It's kind of like Turns case. Sure.
Am I running the restroom?
other cards?
Yeah, it's permal. On the hand.
No, I was just saying, are there cards?
Oh, sorry, yeah. No, they're not cards. Is anybody not ready? Where are their internal links? Their evidence is very weak on the question of how the plan actually leads to Saudi prolife. They didn't actually answer the words of our card that there are too many barriers to Saudi prolife, such as difficulty obtaining the materials. Authoritarian leaders foil their own goals because they interfere with the science process, and Saudi Arabia has extremely limited nuclear infrastructure. Nuclear programs trade off with key economic programs. The AF doesn't solve any of these barriers to Saudi prolife, and they weren't responsive to any of it, which means that you should have a very high threshold for the AF accessing any solvency. They are very weak on the question of how this leads to Saudi prolife.
They only said the perception solves. People know they can't proliferate.
Yeah. And they said it's not about the actual weapons, but rather this the U.S. security guarantees, but they have not isolated why specifically U.S. support is key. That means that Europe villain lowers the probability of their impact because they absolutely have no words for why U.S. security guarantees is key, and that Europe guarantees don't solve. No barrier to Europe, they'll have interoperable weapon systems and solve security guarantees, and Trump circumvents national security declaration proofs. Okay. There are three top-level framing issues with the perm. First is the cell ability to set. The perm is an attempt to perfect and co-opt the theory of the cell implantation from authors like Kent and King without having to grapple with them in the 1AC. This perm is a cell move towards solidity to absolve the gut of the chance that they reify cell inclusions. This is an independent reason that the AF's epistemology is slotted in broad instance of the AF using instances of balance to justify their ballot. They reify the cellular state through the gentle colonial move of reducing arms to Saudi Arabia and propagate images of suffering like U.S. interventionism in their imagination of how they solve this, and the attempt to secure the future of the cellular rejected perm for the slight ideology have a very high threshold for anyone here that tries to tell you that we need to stop U.S. intervention, and it proves that their method of debate uses those images of balance to paper over their text to reify cell inclusive modes of domination. And second is to remove the innocence decide the perm co-ops the ultra-refusal, even if they win, that reducing these sale amounts to Saudi Arabia's negative state action, endorsing the state's authority to regulate these sales means that the alt is inevitably co-opted. The idea that the perm can solve any part of cell inclusive is inherently flawed. I don't know more. No Dabble's refusal were co-opted by pro-reformist movements that forced them into failure because they wanted to engage the political. This also allows people like Donald Trump to create the image of the insubordinate savage, which proves that the perm is just a move to innocence. It recreates cell violence. And three is the incorrigible reform to said legal reform is undertaken only when it is in the interest of the state to secure the domestic subject and re-entrenches these violent processes. There are two ways that this serves the state. First is that it prevents native people from being eliminated from the public consciousness entirely. Our strong evidence is really good on the question of how the stellar state feels constant anxiety about its founding paradoxes, maintaining the figure of the native, therefore creates an anxiety that motivates constant cellular expansion, like viable to control all the Middle East and the Af. And the second reason that it relieves some goat is that the chance that the U.S. is predicated on ongoing genocide, it allows people to feel like good sellers not actually challenging these structures. It means that they can never win. Native state action and legal reform is good when we are forwarding structural claims that have already accounted for this, and the altered mutually exclusive refusal can't be permitted with any other strategy. We refuse to recognize the sovereignty of the U.S. and we refuse the AF. You can't do the AF and refuse it. They said they don't have to recognize the sovereignty of the U.S. to do the plan, but gut check, what the hell does that even mean? You can't pass a policy through Congress without acknowledging that Congress exists and has the authority to regulate arms sales. And they said that the purpose that the AF is a prerequisite accomplishing the ops objectives, but it's not a prerequisite. How does the plan solve infiltration? They have absolutely no words for how the action of the plan text stops people from infiltrating movements. Hold them to a very high explanation on that. Ultimatum. The alternative is refusal through the epistemological sense of the 1AC. The sale of arms to Saudi Arabia is always being fungible through the asking-asking relation to the states. The other is either threatening and needs to be protected even from us, which proves that we destroy U.S. has agent of response, but we are always the subject and they are always the object of study, which is a violent motive at the heart of the colonial project. Our arms regulations with Saudi Arabia is just a chess piece for us to move around the U.S.-controlled geopolitical world, and this continues a project of U.S. world order that has countless interventions. I know that their response will be that they will subvert U.S. power, but A, they don't. That was the 2 and C case made, and B, that U.S. will still attempt interventions even if there are nuclear weapons. The plan just results in shifting goalposts in which the threat of nuclear weapons is normalized, just like the scale of modern warfare has been normalized in relation to warfare in the past. This is just a shifting goalpost. They don't actually resolve any of this violence. Violence just changes and will preempt the seeds of political argument. Okay. We turn the idea of seeding political in the first place. The idea of the engagement is the actual way to actually change reifies the cellular structures dominant and having sovereignty over things like arbitrage in the first place. The only strategic way to disrupt the political is by refusing that exists in the first place. There's no state co-option for this, and they said that there's no spill up, but we don't need to win spill up. The idea that of solving cell liquidity is inherently flawed. That when they said that specific stretch, so refusal is a specific strat. We refuse U.S. sovereignty. The reps, they said it feels good, but there's no spill. But also, this card isn't about refusal. This is about like anti-war movements. This is not a refusal of U.S. sovereignty. This is not in the context of the audit. All they said co-option, but they don't solve co-option. Plin on the perm debate. The alt is an introduction to the epistemological project of the app. It's prior to their ability to access something that means that you sequence the alt before any of their impacts and refusal of the app is a refusal to let their recoding of pro-life in Saudi Arabia justify the action of the app. The alt is deconstructive to the generative process of the when you see the plan. They came to do something but on top of any solvency they have forwarded images that you're used to justify the plan's action. Otherwise, the plan text is incoherent without their reps. We refuse the app as a rhetorical object.
Okay. Okay. Trying to get it. restart. I need to plug in.
Right.
And did you say you sent out cards?
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a dot.
Right. Is anyone not ready?
Just give me a second, sorry. Okay, whenever you're ready.
Proliferation prevents Western nations from utilizing the nuclear monopoly to invade and coerce other countries. Only the ass method of sabotaging institutions can bring down the NPT and decrease the propensity for imperial lines. We outweigh on magnitude. Interventions have killed over 20 million people, lose 15. There were between 9 million and 14 million deaths in Afghanistan, Angela, DPR, Timor, Guatemala, Indonesia, Pakistan, Sudan, all parts of the world have been the target of U.S. Has been responsible for since World War II for deaths of 20 million. And they say barriers to Saudi proliferate. They didn't answer the Gorg evidence. Their defense is an assumed nuclear hedging and the collapse of the NSG. And they say no internal link, but only we have the evidence. Signal of the plan vacates security guarantees. It creates an incentive, and they say circumvention. And they conceded this begs the question of framework, and that he can't actually defy Congress. They can. Framework have separated offense and the resolution, allowing the negative framework. The plan is worse than the status quo or a competitive alternative. Prefer our interpretation. First is fairness. Have generated offense and the resolution, allowing the negative to make the debate solely about discourse, subject position, epistemology, or a hundred other things is unpredictable and skews the debate. Makes app research impossible. And second is sabotage. Debating about fiat consequences of plan enactment is key. There are 4 warrants here. First is exposing cracks. Debating plan enactment helps debaters identify optimal opportunities and dominant institutions. And second is role-playing, practicing sabotage in the debate space primes debaters from thinking about similar performances in real life. And third is practice debate centered on targeted state action, protects distinct paths to decimate state power through sabotage. And fourth is scenario planning, detailed argumentation about the effects of policy are key to destroying complacency about previously failed strategies. And all of this outweighs the only way to prevent violence is dismantling institutions from within, and it solves all of their offense. It teaches students how to infiltrate the government and take down the settler state from inside. Even if we don't go on to be flawless America, the skills of subversion can be used in our daily lives to materially make lives better. And even if they win framework, vote for our 1AC as a speech act. Our proliferation discourse rejects the universal colonialist tropes justifying intervention. Gust under 99. There's a common perception that the nuclear weapons are the most dangerous when they're in the hands of third world leaders using terminology with distinctly colonial overtones. There has been a widespread recession among the U.S. defense, intellectuals, politicians, and pundit leaders, widespread in the media and in literature journals, is shared by liberals as well as conservatives. Western alarmism was particularly evident with India and Pakistan set off their cell phones. There was a similar outburst of alarmism over an Iraqi nuclear weapon. We were not prepared to exercise even such a short-term restraint. They say decay is intellectual. That's not exclusive. They say dogma. They re-entrench dogma. We actually got teams that test epistemologies through rigorous debates about application, and they say roll the ballot. It's arbitrary and self-serving. The fact that it always ends in a presumption ballot proves it's an undesirable method. And they say sick call is hardwired. It's unsubstantiated. And they say the plan focus is bad. No impact to reducing 8 minutes. And we don't include any role for epistemology. It's just a rubric for how it should be evaluated. They say fiat is illusory. Yeah, sure, we're doing for skills impact that could actually result in an AF per analysis about debates happening now. And they say in-round particularly bad. In-round and violence is an obvious reason to suspend any framework. And they say choice of discussion bad, but we chose to discuss imperial violence. It solves all their offense here. They say prereq, it flows AF. The one now the K proper. I'll start on the overview. They say structural analysis first. However, default to contingency, the world is too complex to be summed up. And they say root cause is wrong, even if your authors of the center of colonialism is a distinct process from imperialism that occurs without settlement. Or regardless, they definitely can't solve that root cause. That'll be the alt debate. They say 1% framing bad. That's not us. The consequences debate. Extend the consequences first. Make your decision on the basis of what strategy produces the best material outcomes of the oppressed people. They say you can't evaluate certain harms. There's no reason we can't. They say non-unique. It's wrong. The uniqueness is an argument. Ontology doesn't implicate solvency because of the subversion debate. The permit extend permutation to both cases a prereq to operationalizing their politics. Otherwise, skip the timer.
Yeah.
Okay, they say root to innocence, best question of the link, and no coherent impact and extension that outweighs. And they say co-option. This is our argument. It was done above. They say reaffirm authority, but we recognize Congress exists. We don't think it's legitimate. They say anxiety, floating impact, no contextualization. The link debate, no link. They say new AFA maximizes the clash because research incentives regardless generic clashes in our framework interpretation. They say if you have a savior reason, this presupposes that we don't solve. They haven't challenged our method. We're out advocating they want to see. Also, there's no impact of this. They say rules of benevolence, the advantages that unintended consequential shows impotence and not competence. This turns it on its head, and we solve impact and innovation with nuclear deterrence. And the global ordering link is precisely backwards. We reject global ordering and precipitate its demise. They just make assertions about this. The all debate all fails to resolve operation. No spill ups sufficient to resolve any of the impact claims on a scale anywhere close to the app, and therefore they basically need to win framework. And they don't explain how refusal actually solves or is portable in any way that can rectify broader injustices. Means you defer app, don't arbitrarily prioritize, and most of the analysis they do here presupposes the link debate and
back to the perm wall.
The perm wall.
Otherwise, any movement.
Sorry?
Otherwise, any movement.
Otherwise, any movement. The endorsement will get called by the state government's agents can easily infiltrate by manipulating, conflict, discrediting their methods, or shaking adherence. The movement of the anti-war movements prove the state uses Contella tactics to split the movements and turn people against each other. That's shepherds. They don't answer the fact that this is connected to our method.
That's good.
Okay. We have 5:14 starting now. voter's going to be case K. Everybody good? The negative presumption. The F doesn't solve any of their impacts. First, the argument was dropped in the 1 AR. Don't allow new 2 AR cross applications and re-explanation. The dish results in shifting goalposts. Even if they win the Saudi prolif happens, it doesn't stop intervention. Rather, the threat of nuclear weapons becomes a normalized aspect of warfare, just like drones or missiles or machine guns. When each new technology was proliferated, that means that they never actually solve, but rather just accelerate warfare to new levels, which turns case that they win their consequential. Listen for me, because it results in more violence and death. The U.S. will inevitably intervene and arbitrary of whether or not the plan happens in 2. There is no internal link between the plan and Saudi prolif. Hold them to the 1 AR explanation, which was that the loss of U.S. security assurances results in proliferation. Don't do the work for them. Vote. Don't vote. You don't understand how they solve their impact coming out of the 1 AR. Don't allow new 2 AR explanation or spin. We can't predict your answer. They have no warrants for where the loss of U.S. security assurances causes Saudi Arabia to proliferate. There are hundreds of countries that don't have U.S. backing that aren't proliferating. We'll concede that they fiat through circumvention. They said it in cross-examination means that they don't access any of their USFG education officer. Officers, the gap is key to learning how hacking institutions is false. When they fiat through the actual act of hacking means we never learn how to actually hack into institutions, and dooms us to unchecked methods where they say hacking is a good thing. It means they don't have any offense in the framework. We don't actually investigate how to hack institutions. Means that they have literally no offense when they don't resolve and don't lead to any of the skills offense that they've talked about. There are 2 to 3 concessions in the 1 AR. The witnesses debate. They said the 2 years will not be predictable. Hold on to what they said in the 1 AR. They don't have we don't have a 3 AR to beat back against any new analysis. Even if you think that some of them are good arguments, that they are not predictable. You should know the 2 AR to the theater because it's infinitely regressive. Otherwise, the 1 AR would never have to say anything on the K. Settler colonialism, they structure the group users for intent that they continue the rough extent of human through the intersection of indigeneity and blackness or the triad. The K turns it out ways for one really important reason. They don't have an understanding or explanation as to why the violence in the legacy happens. Winning the root cause debate means you should have a very high threshold for the bar of any absolvency claim because they just paper over the root cause of violence in school. Do more on the root cause debate later, but the concession of the ontology debate means that they can never pass the plan and hijack the state because liberal policymakers will always imagine it as one, especially when the plan is literally happening. Now there is no way that they can fiat away the ontological investment of the state into the continued extermination and the state and the process of perfecting the human is literally predicated off of defining what it is not in relation to what the state or what the human is, which is not settler, which is not indigenous, non-black. They have to continue the process of making other things that to determine what they are not. It is not a static identity process. Rather, it is a continued process because they're things like the plan, things like policy change that are constantly happening that force the U.S. to continue the project of redefining itself in the context of what is or isn't human, what is or isn't a good settler move. Means that ontology is necessarily inevitable. Proves the ontology means that it should filter the entirety of the link debate. I don't need to win the alternative to win the fact that the link will turn 100% risk of the case. We don't need to prove any risk of the we don't need to solve the link to prove that the app can't inherently solve. If we win that it is invested in the ontological process of settlement, it proves that the app can never solve for imperialism and necessarily reifies the impacts that it claims to solve for. They say that on framework. The counter-interpretation is to defend the epistemological assumptions of what the 1AC they should be held accountable for the even if the 1AC severing out of reps is not real word. We've seen the news. We know it's not true. They can't claim to say solve imperialism when they sever out of the plan. It's just better for fairness because you have to weigh the entirety of the 1AC. We got to call them out on parts that are particularly problematic. It's better for procedural friendness. Extend the plan focus to decide that there was no impact to not weighing the app, but there 100% is. First of all, their education is premised on the basis of their education and skills net benefit. It's premised on the basis of unanalyzed risk. It's a method which is uniquely bad because it leads to unchecked actions and they only propagating even more violence. So severing reps in turns case proves their interpretation creates bad faith and even worse debaters or worse hackers like sure, other places get informed subjectivity, but that's not responsive either. Interpretations used on the guessings and allows teams to win despite having race justification. This turns any portable skills, education, and procedural fairness because it trains debaters to separate out of race justifications, which means that any spell claim is predicated off of unchecked reps and unchecked hacking, which means that even if they win that the plan does hack, and even if they win that they get those skills are necessarily predicated off of racist representations. Yeah, it's predicated off of the state engagement. That is inherently bad because it reifies the notion of the state in comparison to what the plan is. I read it in the root cause explanation for the violence that happens within Saudi Arabia is literally after post World War II when the Ottoman Empire dissolved British colonialism, divided the Middle East into multiple different sections, dividing nations into people creating things like ethnic wars, which is why Saudi Arabia is engaging in all of this conflict and why the proliferation would happen in the first place because Saudi Arabia wants to become the regional hegemon due to the fact that it wants the most areas possible. We explain the root cause and the violence of the app probably means that the only way that you can vote is net on the link debate. First, we'll extend the striking act as evidence to appeal to the state creates forms of liberalism, writing militarism, police violence at the home, increased risk of benevolence that allows the use to continue forms of effective colonialism and colonial imposition abroad while touching the plan, while telling the plan is seizing arms. Those are terminal defense against any critique of the youth. Don't let them claim sending the bill through Congress. Doesn't agree, but I say that because the Max State is a good benevolent act, whether or not that's the implication of the affirmative. First, their own evidence literally says that non-proliferators would only be
muscle of the superpowers excluded to enforce it. Their enforcement would be effective because of the power they possess over the sea, which proves that the AF is necessarily tied to the continued U.S. hegemony internationally, which means that like there's no way that the AF can actually garner another effects if they don't do that. On the perm debate. Do you have any stuff for the perm? On the perm, they don't solve corruption. They have done no more to debate about how the plain text or speech acts stop people from infiltrating the act refusal. They came to the perm both doing the plain text. They have the acknowledgement of U.S. sovereignty and legal authority, except for what it is that they use the scholarship of the king for the battle of propagating their settler epistemology. Refuse the act as the alternative because it is it's a coherence of the settler state.
Okay. Anyone not ready? It's try or die for the affirmative. There is massive and ongoing imperial violence in the status quo. More than 20 million have died as a result of U.S. intervention in the past decade, and millions more are set to perish at the hands of U.S. defense planners. They have not explained alternative solvency, and they've conceded that their method of refusal doesn't galvanize any sort of change and is wholly insufficient to disrupt a very, very violent status quo, which necessarily means that there's only a risk that the affirmative can make things better as opposed to worse by shredding the nuclear monopoly. Their first argument is that giving states nuclear weapons vis-a-vis collapsing the NPT is not sufficient to stop imperialism, but the Schellenberger evidence is great on this question. It says that no state with nuclear weapons has ever been invaded, despite nuclear weapons having been around for a very long period of time, since their first deployment in 1945. I didn't understand a warrant for why nuclear weapons would suddenly lose their luster because they become a normalized threat. Sure, they become normalized. That's why we understood this in the block as a sort of very weak link argument, but that normalization doesn't implicate their deterrent effect, which is our solvency claim, which means that you're definitely not voting on presumption. They assert that we don't have an internal link, and they appeal to their own lack of understanding about how we solve. But the problem is that we have specific contextual evidence that says vacating our security guarantee in the context of Saudi Arabia, given that their unique position as a nuclear hedger and given their necessity of the U.S. security guarantee to deter Iran, will necessarily spark proliferation that cascades into a sort of spiral and causes all sorts of oppressed states to acquire those weapons. Finally, they say the fact that we fiated past circumvention proves that we can't solve our offense, but all of our offense on framework was in the context of debating the consequences of the plan being key to develop sabotage skills and that sort of in-depth policy analysis in order to convince people about relative desirability. It's not about talking about literally the causal mechanisms that lead to the enactment of policies, which are very easy to research and understand. The K proper. If we win the framework debate, we win. As I alluded to on case, they haven't extended an alternative. So long as your ballot centers on the relative desirability of the plan as opposed to any other epistemological consideration, you are definitely voting for us, given the fact that we are key to manage sort of imperial consequences that are pervasive in the status quo. They have conceded all of our arguments about why centering the debate on hypothetical government action is best. I don't have to reinvent the wheel here due to role experimentation, scenario analysis, etc. They have no defense of those claims, and that's necessarily exclusive with centering or even allowing links predicated off of epistemology. They say we don't get to several representations, but this is just an assertion. They say that they allow us to weigh the F, in which case they definitely lose, given that their link argument doesn't outweigh massive imperial interventions, and they have no way of producing uniqueness for that link argument. They say plan focus matters, but again, there's no impact to not centering other whole 8 minutes of the 1AC, rather centering the plan, and then only talking about the other 8 minutes in relation to the justifications for the plan is sufficient. The hacker's argument flows affirmative. I did that work on the case debate, and obviously if there was interpersonal racism in round, that's a reason to suspend any framework argument, which they've conceded. They haven't won that there was literal interpersonal racism, which is not a reason to negate the solvent potential of the plan. Now, they have two arguments in the overview on the K proper that are attempts to get you to vote on presumption. The first is the root cause argument, but even if they're right about root cause, that's wholly irrelevant because they have no causal mechanism for undoing those causes, and so long as we're winning solvency due to the spread of nuclear deterrence, that's sufficient to check imperial violence, even if that imperial violence is motivated by settler colonialism. They say ontology debate means that we can't solve, but they've conceded that even if the state is sort of ontologically wired to try to do things to oppress indigenous populations, that's not a reason why we couldn't trick them or subvert them, which is the point of our mechanism. The point of our strategy is that the state doesn't want to do the plan, that the state is sort of ontologically messed up, and yet that we can still accomplish the aims that we want. They've also just asserted that we're invested in status quo institutions, but there's no reason why that's true, which will be addressed on the link debate. Go there now. The impact to the link is minuscule in comparison to the AF, which means that even if you strike a middle ground where you're willing to weigh the plan versus the link, it is definitely, you're still definitely voting for us. They did no impact calculus other than to assert that reification caused militarized violence, but there's no uniqueness for this, and there's no explanation of how refusal spills up to solve for any of this. They've also conceded all of our arguments about co-option and all the internal link work we did on framework as reasons why we can resist co-option. We obviously don't uphold the status quo. Yes, our evidence references the state, but it says that collapsing the non-proliferation regime impedes the ability of the states to collude to enforce hegemonic dominance in the status quo, which is necessarily sufficient to solve the AF. There is no coherent explanation of this link argument other than to make vague references to 1AC evidence without actually explaining causally how the plan causes bad things or how our representations cause bad things. We've forefronted a specific method for resolving imperialism. Good debate.
Sorry, I had to get
Good
that down.
debate.
Good debate. Good debate.
Oh, did you want to?
I'm making rhubarb. Not rhubarb. Why did I say that? We love rhubarb. That's really offensive to rhubarb. Because I was thinking of Kilroy.
Oh, no.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Mr. Rhubarb.
See if I left my water bottle in here. I did not. Doesn't look like it. Okay.
I'm ready. I'm ready.
Alright, I'll go get after it. He's ready.
Okay. You went that way. Yep. Yeah. Okay.
I ended up voting affirmative. My general impression is that the residual link arguments that you win are not enough to sort of short circuit the affirmative's ability to solve for their advantages, which I don't think are just embedded in like the case advantages, but also in their arguments about why fiat in this instance is productive. And I don't think that your link arguments generate offense against the plan. I think that if there is a different or more robust defense or an attempt to engage the alternative in solving the AF, that could potentially change the way that these link arguments are calculated and make them more offensive, but ultimately I don't think that's the case in this debate. I'll start by talking about framework. I think that, I do think that there is generally a difficulty in this 2NR to match the strength of the block. I think that there are a lot of arguments that are made in the block that don't get made in the 2NR, and that puts you behind. So on framework generally, I don't think that your best arguments address the AF. I just don't think that the affirmative in this case tries to sever their representations. I don't think they try to engage in racist representations, and I think that if you believe that that's the case through the 1AC, that it's sort of your burden to demonstrate why that's the case. I also don't understand that even if they do justify those things in the future, that means that their framework claims are wrong or are counterproductive in this particular instance, or address their reasons that engaging in sabotage would be beneficial to the way that we think about these claims. The AF wins a few arguments that I think make it difficult for you to win framework. Not that that is an end game for them, but certainly changes the way I see things. First, I think that they're winning, that there are benefits of engaging in sabotage as a strategy, and why fiat is important to that effort. I think that they're winning that particularly offensive occurrences in the debate would be a reason to suspend framework discussions anyway. So like if somebody made a really offensive remark that we probably wouldn't be having a framework discussion, that is sort of it's in the 1AR, 2AR, not really dealt with in the 2NR, and I think that makes sense to me. And I also think that all of these things still beg the question of alt solvency to a degree, which is indeed a separate question from framework, but I guess what I sort of resolved was that if they're making headway on these framework arguments, even though it's not probably a reason to exclude my consideration of the alt or think that it's not a valuable option, or that the strategy of the negative is without consideration, it certainly means that I think that there has to be that the alt has to be effective in some way, but I'll get to that in a minute. The overall analysis on framework makes me think that the counter-interpretation on framework, or that the AF's interpretation of framework makes sense and isn't really dealt with, and resolves any sort of offensive arguments that you might have been making headway on. Because this idea of best material outcome seems to account for a lot of those considerations, and I don't think undermine at least my perception of what fiat is. Because of I think the way that I resolve this framework question, again, it's not that I don't think the alternative shouldn't be considered, but I do think that I reach a threshold that requires you to prove that the plan is a bad idea, because there's not really a competitive alternative or a forced choice. So in doing this, I I really look, I look at the link debate to try to find where you're making an offensive argument. I just don't think that 2NR does. I don't think that there's a unique offensive argument that isn't, answered by or overwhelmed by the AF, and just a simple, cost-benefit analysis consideration. I definitely don't think that you're winning that something bad happens in a world where I imagine that the plan passes. I think that the arguments that you're making in the 2NR are sort of predicated on the existence of fiat. They're sort of a way to address fiat. Your takeouts in the 2NR rely on fiat just not existing, about the plan not being able to take place in real life, and I don't think that that deals with this sort of separate discursive benefit of engaging in sabotage that I just don't think you ever really deal with. And the affirmative's claim is that changes the way that they approach these types of things in real life, in their attempts to generate the best material outcome in whatever we are able to imagine. So a couple of things to think about here. One is that I don't think that we ever really talk about what constitutes fiat in this debate, and I think that ultimately I can sort of imagine what the world of the AF looks like. And second, again, are these advantages to sabotage, and I'm just being repetitive on that. But these arguments kind of leave, sort of unquestioned, the ability of the plan to do something, whether, again, through an act of sabotage and the way that they present the case in the debate, or through imagining that the plan is able to engage the world in a different way than the status quo, or provide some advantage to addressing imperialism.
Okay. How did the ontology debate factor into your decision?
I think that matters more in a world where you're winning framework. Ultimately, that it's not an offensive argument against the AF unless there's some forced choice. They're winning that this debate should be decided through, that I have to determine whether the plan is a good or bad idea. And I don't think that you require me to do that in the 2NR. I think that that's your hope, certainly, but I don't think any of your link arguments do that, or, as I said at the beginning, effectuate the ability of the AF to sort of meet their desired end, if that makes sense. So like, even if ontology is a relevant question, I don't understand why that outweighs the AF or prevents the AF from being able to access their solvency claims.
So then how did you evaluate the offensive argument about shifting goalposts and the solvency deficit, or like lack of explanation in the work on case?
How did I evaluate the
so
shifting, say that again?
So in the 2NR, there were two arguments on case. First was that they create shifting goalposts in which the use of nuclear weapons is just normalized and they don't solve their impacts and create more violence. The second is that they don't have an explanation of their internally.
Of the what?
Internally.
So I definitely think that they do. I think that we read the 1AC differently in that regard. And I think that still leaves this question of the advantage of engaging in sabotage, which is a unique benefit that the affirmative brings that the negative doesn't really address. But this question of shifting goalposts, I think I'm convinced by the 2AR explanation that is the AF, that nuclear weapons becoming normalized is the way to deal with nuclear apartheid in the status quo. And certainly, even if the outcome or sort of terminal, effect of that is, whatever it is, because we don't really discuss that in this debate, that there is something that is beyond allowing you to vote on presumption.
I just have another question. Did you draw a line between that 2NR explanation for the shifting goalposts argument?
I think that the 2NR explanation there is new, frankly. I don't think the 2NR explanation on case matches the 1NR explanation. So the same standard that I would hold, and I did go back and look at the 1AR, and I do think that it matches up well enough to the 2AR, especially on the K debate proper. But on this question, I just don't think that the 2NR, that the explanation of the case turns or the link arguments in the 2NR strikes me as offensive or a reason that the AF does something that's bad, if that makes sense. I think that her argument and that your argument in the 2NR is really an appeal for presumption and the idea that the affirmative doesn't do anything, and that's the way that I think those arguments are characterized, and I think that's risky in a world where there's not, again, a robust defense of the alt.
So then why do we need to win the alternative then to win that debate?
Because
Like, how
otherwise
can
you
I-
don't have a competitive option and your arguments don't become offense. They're just an interesting observation about the app. And if they win that there's an advantage still, then your arguments are just takeouts that don't terminally disprove the app. And separately, don't address this issue of whether the act of sabotage is valuable. So I think that there are benefits to the app that we're discussing here, the question of an imagined world where the plan is enacted, and their attempt to be saboteurs. And even if you are making headway on a presumption level argument on these case takeouts, it doesn't address this other question about how your link arguments or your case turns engage the method of the app in terms of being saboteurs.
Okay. So like in terms of being saboteurs, we like to go a lot of times like for like the circumvention stuff, and it's like you fiat through circumvention, which means that you don't get access to any of your like hacking education or like education about the topic writ large. Like, what do you think we could have done better to kind of explain why that was a takeout of their impacts?
Well, I don't think that that's what you attempted, well, maybe what you attempted to do in this 2NR, but it didn't sort of come off to me that way. Again, I sort of thought that these arguments on case were presumption arguments, and that the link arguments sort of become the same on the K. I definitely think that that there's a question about, I'm not entirely sure that that's persuasive in this context. Even if there is some, double bind about their use of durable fiat or the way that they are able to overcome circumvention, that's a relevant question for an AF framework, right? Like, why, we wouldn't even answer those questions in your framework, right? Like,
right, but even in the context of their framework.
Yeah.
Like,
then you're left weighing the advantages of the AF versus that. I don't understand where that gets you.
But it's talking about like
even
the
attempt,
impact.
even
of their
what they do
framework.
initially would be better than this residual link argument that you might win at some point. Like the advantages of addressing nuclear apartheid or other countries responding with. I mean, I do think that you lose the argument that Saudi Arabia would proliferate a lot instantly. That they're winning sort of a specific explanation for why that's true, and that your general claim that they wouldn't is not really enough to take out that element of the AF. And so I think that initial push, whether that involves, I think that what you have to do is tie fiating through circumvention to your framework arguments and to demonstrate why that's a reason that we should only consider ontology, or why it comes before consideration of the case impacts. And I don't think that happens. I am certainly willing to vote on an argument that there is some sort of reason to reject the app on an ontological basis, sans an alternative. But the arguments that you go for in that case would have to be offensive if they're not solved by an alt, if that makes sense. Because then it's not a matter of comparison. It's just like they do something even though it's not enough to sort of meet the full requirement of their advantage or solve for all of imperialism or to do exactly what you would want them to do.
So did you think then like the ontology debate in the 2NR was not offensive enough?
I didn't think that the ontology, I did not think that ontology was prioritized in the 2NR in a way that would mean that I evaluated above the case impacts, or that the app doesn't engage in those same types of questions. And I think that
I'm so sorry, that didn't seem to answer her question.
yeah, no, it does, absolutely.
How does the ontology-
There was not impact calculus in the 2NR
That's different.
that would, it's not different. I said the 2NR did not prioritize the question of ontology in a way that makes it outweigh the case impacts, and I just repeated the same thing with different words. So I'm sorry if you didn't understand it that way. 2NR impact calculus on this question does not exist.
So I actually have a question if
Sure.
you're not going to be rude.
Well, then maybe we shouldn't engage.
Okay,
If you
I
feel
do
like
actually
if you
have
feel
a,
like
I
I'm
do
being
have a
rude.
question. I do
Okay,
have a question.
sure.
So you say that the 2AR kind of convinced you on a couple of questions. It doesn't sound like you really thought the 2NR was convincing. What can we do in the future to convince you?
The 2NR should match the block. It's difficult in this
Okay.
case because she gets spread out.
Okay.
The 2NR should extend the alt and should use the alt as a way to affect the case in some way, to solve for and address the link arguments that she's going for. The link argument should short circuit the ability of the affirmative to solve and should make some attempt to sever the plan from its advantages. Or there should be some ontological criticism that functions independently of an alternative that I could use to vote against the aff. None of those things happen in the rebuttals for the negative in this debate.
Okay, I think we are done.
Thank you, Billy.
You're welcome.
Well, just moved down to 116 figure high. We've been in that one all but this round. So.